Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. This is a US election special, giving you an update on what's been going on. This is concerning, to begin with, post-debate, the post-debate landscape. Trying to work out what effect the debate has had on the polls, on the electorate, what analysts think. Show you a couple of bits I didn't show you before that I think are pertinent. And then look at other bits of news and other topics and polls and whatnot. Now, there will be an awful lot that I don't include here because I don't have time to do everything. And there will also be quite a lot in here. And I apologise up front, this is going to be quite a long video. Anyway, let's start by looking indeed at the debate again. And we're going to get, this is Tim Miller of the Bulwark, who was a former Republican and is now not so much, not a big fan of Trump. He's getting Essie Cupp, who's a contributor to CNN, to give her opinion of the debate in general. And what I want to say up front is that my view is aligned with most analysts who are fairly objective. So if I look at British analysts who aren't kind of drawn into camps of MSNBC versus Fox, right? And even CNN gets a hard time by a lot of people on the right. Look at the British analysts. Everyone across the board seems to think that Trump had a bad time. And I completely agree. I think Trump had in this debate for all the reasons I gave you in my debate analysis. I think, however, I'm going to refine my views a little bit in that one, Harris did defeat him. She left lots of bait for him to get hooked on, and he sunk that. He chomped on that bait and got taken in hook, line, and sinker. And this was because she was well prepared, had some decent answers to the questions, but as much as she did well, Trump actually didn't do very well. So you can argue that as much as she won the debate, he also lost it. She did do a good job, but he did a bad job, and he fell at some pretty obvious hurdles. The other thing that's worth noting is, and you can also lay this at the feet of Trump because he didn't hold her to account. She was vague on some answers and didn't answer some questions. Now, what the right-wing analysts and pro-Trump people are doing is blaming the moderators for this, for not, like, I don't know, fact-checking her enough. But it wasn't fact-checking. It was she just wasn't answering the questions as much. But that's where Trump should have been listening to what she was saying and then having a go at her and finding the weakness to say, well, actually, you haven't talked about this. No, what about this? And likewise, at the end of the debate, he talked about, well, you've had 4 years to do this. Why haven't you done that? And that's a really good point and a good argument to make against her. But he didn't make it until the very end of the debate when it was all over. In other words, he did a really bad job of holding her feet to the fire in a way that you would expect, especially with someone who's so experienced with debating. But he wasn't prepared. So he apparently got off the plane literally 2 hours before. He just got off the plane, went straight to debate, thought, right, I'm going to do this. Right, I'm not going to prepare. I've had some kind of policy discussions with people like Matt Gaetz and Tulsi Gabbard. I've got Laura Loomer, this kind of right-wing extremist that's been hanging around with me. I'm going to have photo ops with her and blah, blah, blah. And I'm going to get on this debate stage and bish, bash, bosh. And it didn't go very well because he wasn't prepared, right? And that's a bit of an issue. There's going to be all this when we'll have some of this discussion in a bit as to whether there will be a second debate, whether there should be a second debate from either point of view. Personally, I think both of them should be wanting to debate again. He should be wanting to debate because he's got to be able to do better than that. She's going to be wanting to debate because she although she's got more to lose in one sense, because if she does another debate, it won't be as good as that. It could be as good as that or nearly as good, in which case she will do really well in the eyes of the audience. For her, this is about getting herself on primetime television. For him, not so much. Everyone knows who he is. She's still introducing herself to a lot of the electorate. So I think there's some good arguments to suggest both of them should go for a second debate. He's now saying that he won't and coming up with some crappy justification as to why he's saying that. Now, this is what S.E. Cupp says about the debate.
Like, what was your top line? Give it to me.
I feel like Kamala Harris must be feeling what Putin and Kim Jong-un feel, which is like, I can't believe this guy fell for it. Like, I can't believe how easily manipulated this guy was.
This is such an important point, and one of the reasons I think Trump is not fit to be president of the United States. I do a lot of talking to you about Putin and about Ukraine war and about foreign policy and the foreign diplomatic landscape. Trump really is manipulatable, and I've said for a long time, flattery gets you a long way with him, and he gets easily manipulated by Putin. You look at, was it 2018 Helsinki press conference, one of the worst points of his entire tenure for Trump, where Putin was able to get Trump to come around to Putin's point of view and diss his own intelligence services. It was absolutely terrible. Kim Jong-un, like love letters from him. Jair Bolsonaro at the time. Viktor Orban, then and now. Just an absolute... Well, he fawns over Viktor Orban. And then Xi Jinping, too. He is... If Kamala Harris, with a little bit of debate prep, can manipulate Trump into falling into a bunch of really simple traps throughout the debate, what the frick does that say about international, diplomatic situations where dictators who are well versed in this, someone who's a former KGB agent, are with Trump, sometimes alone? So that meeting after which you had the Helsinki press conference was Putin alone with Trump and a translator. Only the translator knows what happened there. It was a really egregious decision to do that alone. He was manipulated by Putin, came out afterwards and was singing Putin's praises and basically advocating doing exactly what Putin wanted. And there's an example of a human being who was apparently very easy to manipulate. And we saw that on the debate stage. And so why I'm playing you what S.E. Cupp is saying is because I think that is absolutely vital to understanding the weakness of Donald Trump.
She laid out trap after trap after trap. These weren't like well-concealed traps.
No.
These were pretty obvious traps, and he walked into every single one like giddily. She must be, I mean, she's a prosecutor, but she's not Houdini. There was no magic. She laid a trap. He walked right into it, like laughing and screaming and like happily. It was, I think even for me, having covered him so long, somewhat surprising to see just how easily manipulated he was by her. And I think if you're a swing state voter who is undecided and you don't really love either of these people, you just watch that thinking, man, he's a sucker. What a sucker.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good point there. Now, the other place I wanted to go was to talk about abortion and her answer on abortion that was really good. And it was probably one of the highlights of her performance in that debate. And I didn't give it enough airtime, I guess, in my previous analysis.
And also the states, and it's like he didn't even prep the answer on his hardest question, and then you get to Kamala's answer. I want to play one bit from that.
And one does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government, and Donald Trump certainly, should not be telling a woman what to do with her body. I have talked with women around our country. You want to talk about this is what people wanted? Pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in a car in the parking lot. She didn't want that. Her husband didn't want that. A 12 or 13-year-old survivor of incest being forced to carry a pregnancy to term. They don't want that. And I pledge to you, When Congress passes a bill
Speaking to the
put
audience.
back in place the protections
You.
of Roe v. Wade, as President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law.
That, and as these guys go on to say, that was a really good answer because it had an emotional aspect. So she was clearly emotional there in the right kind of way. That was an emotive answer. So she's connecting these big ideas with emotion and speaking to you as a human, and you are getting that. But if you're a suburban woman or any kind of female voter, I think that's going to appeal to you. That was well rehearsed. That was a scripted answer that she had off pat, in a way that Trump just didn't. And I think that shows the difference. His answer that he'll go on to say was, I think he answered, or maybe he said it before, it's absolute nonsense. But her answer was on point.
That answer was prepped. That was a heat-seeking missile aimed at pro-life swing voters that don't like Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Or people that were for some types of restrictions, right? Like it was... anyway, you go.
Weapons grade. It was a weapons grade answer, and she had clearly planned it. But what was so great about it was, A, she delivered those lines very emotionally and passionately. So it, I think, connected with real people. And she said everything short of, and you did this. What she was saying was, we don't want this. Women don't want this. You know, girls who've been raped, they don't want this. And you did this. Yeah. She looked at him as she sort of laid out the consequences of that Supreme Court decision, and she tied it directly to him. And we know this puts him in a pretzel because he loves to take credit for it, but he's also trying to distance himself. So he had nothing. He had nothing for that, I think, very surgical and creatively crafted answer that did all the things, checked all the boxes: emotional, personal, passionate, political, policy, and she made it about him. It was great.
You're looking
Really, really good analysis, and I think it's spot on. It's amazing that he didn't have these prepared answers for these difficult questions. Now, the same can also be said about Harris. So she's going to be tested more and more on the economy. Now, I think we'll come to this later because I think there is an awful lot she can say, but the idea of inflation and what people are feeling at the grocery store, stuff like that, she evaded having to answer that, and he didn't hold her to account. So again, I think that's his loss rather than her win there. But if they do debate again, you know he's going to be much better prepped on exactly how to attack Harris. He was just going on culture wars stuff and fringe right-wing talking points from the internet and hoping that was going to do the job, and it just didn't. Now, to that point, so that last answer that Kamala Harris gave, talking about people in car parks bleeding, blah, 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 Trump's former director of the White House personnel, and he's famous for doing these TikTok videos where he goes and eats in diners. I've seen a whole bunch of them, and he gives you these kind of throwaway comments or digging, has a dig at X, Y, and Z. So he went to TikTok to mock Harris's debate answer on abortion and challenged a single woman to come forward with a story similar to the one that she just described, right? And it blew up in his face because nearly 10,000 did. And in fact, CNN then did a segment where they showed one of those women talking through what had happened to her. You're playing with fire if you are going to pick a fight with this kind of topic. So you're talking about pregnancy, you're talking about, you're a bloke talking about a female issue and female bodily autonomy, and you are calling into question the lived experiences of potentially, unless you've done your research, if you just think as a bloke, I'm sure no woman's experienced that, what a load of rubbish, that's a lie, that never happens. And then you go on TikTok and do this video where you're sitting dipping your food in dip and then say, yeah, of course, no one's experienced that, what a load of rubbish, she's a liar type thing. And then like 10,000 women are like, yeah, that is my reality. Thank you very much for being so insulting. You're playing with fire because this is a very important demographic, and if you screw that demographic over, you're not going in the right direction. So I think that was interesting. Jared Moskowitz, who is a firebrand, brilliant representative here, Democrat. saying, again, talking about the kind of trap. It wasn't a hidden strategy. They were literally telling people, well, in fact, let him say it in his own words rather than me say.
And to think, right, like Kamala's strategy it wasn't a hidden strategy. They were literally telling people, hey, we're going to go out there and we're going to try to get under Donald Trump's skin. This is the strategy. We're going to get under his skin and we're going to let Donald be Donald. And the flip side of that, the Donald Trump strategy was also very public. We're going to make sure we don't let her get under our skin. And literally 11 minutes in, she goes crowd size. And he goes, Viktor Orban, they're eating puppies and cats. Abdul.
That Abdul thing, I forgot to mention it in my analysis. He talks about talking to the Taliban leader, Abdul, and there is no, he's just talking nonsense the whole time. Even that was a lie, effectively, or just a complete mistruth. But anyway.
Concepts of plans, executing babies. I mean, it was like diarrhea of the mouth as soon as she said crowd size. I can't actually recall telegraphing your plan, letting your opponent know what your plan is, your opponent prepping against your plan, and then within a second of launching your plan, your opponent falling for it immediately.
That's a really, really good point. Now, Michelle Dimitrov here on one of my threads said, I was chatting with trolls about Harris calling for another debate. They're angry because, this is with people in the right-wing information spaces, saying that it was rigged. It was 3 against 1, like the two moderators were against. I mean, it's ridiculous. Like, yeah, she had the questions. Harris knew the questions ahead. So you've got all these conspiracy theories, and they are planted disinformation. Well, I've had people come to me say, oh yeah, they're against her, or you're seeing all these videos talking about all these things on Twitter, talking about how she had the questions given to her advanced by someone. There's a whistleblower within ABC, and all of this is just complete is lies. You could even be Russian disinformation. Do not fall for it. Do not think because you've read that somewhere on a social media platform that it is true that there is a whistleblower and that she was handed the questions. The reason she answered the questions well is because they were freaking obvious. You're going to be asked about inflation. You're going to be asked about the economy. You're going to be asked about January the 6th. You're going to be asked about, i.e. defending democracy. You're going to be asked about foreign policy and so on and so forth. Like, have answers prepared to that. She was preparing for a week on that. She didn't need to be given answers by some whistleblower. It's just absolute nonsense. But that's all they've got. If you complain about the referee, then you know that you didn't do a good enough job by and large when you're talking about sport. And here they're just like, oh, it was all rigged, it was against us. It was just like when you lost the election, it was rigged. No, you didn't do well enough. Harris had earpieces. Only Trump got fact checked. Yeah, he got fact checked way more than her. Why? Because he lied more than her, as according to fact check analysis. You look at Daniel Dale, finding he lied 33 times. She misspoke once about what was the highest rate. She was left with the highest rate, but it wasn't the highest rate. It was the highest rate within Trump's, I don't know, is it something, unemployment? So the unemployment was high. It was highest under Trump, but then it came down, and then that's when they took over. It came down a bit. So when they took over, it wasn't the highest, but that's what she got wrong. You could call into question certain other turns of phrases she used and whatnot, but then, goodness me, you could do that. I mean, the whole Trump's thing about Ukraine, literally 100% of what he said, you parse a sentence down and every phrase was like empirically incorrect. Like, my goodness. So that's why you were fact-checked a lot, because you were not talking in facts. But as Michelle here says, but also they're complaining about all this thing, but then they also say, but Trump won. Harris slept her way into all her jobs. So, she only got there because of DEI. She's unqualified and unwise. She's dumb as a rock, says Trump. She's stupid. She's unwise. She slept her way to the top. She only got that job because she's black or Asian black, and basically it's all really unfair. But Trump also won, and he proved how useless Harris was. And then you're trying to have it every single way. And as Michelle says, I wish I was conservative. What a roller coaster of emotions. Just like, yeah, it was this, it was that, it was this, it was that, it was this, that. Or she did a better job of preparing, did a better job on the night. He was arrogant, unprepared, and was schooled. So then lots of people coming out saying, well, they're handling this really well. So people are calling for the removal of ABC's broadcast license. Trump has said this as well. Criminally charge the moderators and executives for campaign finance fraud. Seriously? ABC News is following up on their cracktastic debate by airing Jimmy Kimmel with special guest George Conway, in case you're wondering whether or not their network deliberately planned to go after Trump tonight. Or it could be that right-wing comedy doesn't do as well as left-wing comedy. And that's why you have more shows on your networks that are left-wing comedy. Because punching up is better than punching down. And we can get onto like the theories of comedy and whether that holds. I've written several articles on that. But anyway, I don't want to go down that road and digress. But there is an awful lot of complaint about the moderators and ABC. Sean Davis, the CEO of The Federalist, that's who this chap is, believes that ABC should lose its broadcast license and that David Muir and Lindsay Davis and various ABC News executives should be indicted on federal criminal charges. Now, Trump on Fox News has said, and he said in various places now, that he doesn't want to do another debate. And one of his arguments initially with Sean Hannity, the Fox News anchor, was that in the world of boxing or UFC, when a fighter gets beaten or knocked out, they get up and scream, I demand a rematch, I demand a rematch. Well, it's no different with a debate. She was beaten badly last night. Every poll had us winning. In one case, 92-8. So why would I do a rematch? Of course, when he beat Biden, he wants a rematch, right? So he tries to have it both ways. And it's ridiculous that you only call for a rematch if you lose. It's just absolutely ridiculous. Also, this idea that when he came out into Spin Room, which it very rarely happens, he did it once in the primaries back in 2016 period, I think it was. Unless it was the 2020 primaries. But anyway, generally you don't go into Spin Room, and he went in Spin Room, which was kind of unheard of, and showed that things were looking bad straight after the debate. And he was coming out with all these poll numbers, but the poll numbers were not official official polls where you've got a methodology and you publish that methodology and you try and get a weighted sample, or samples that are weighted in particular ways to be reflective of society, and then blah blah blah. Or you go on Twitter or YouTube and I'm going to do a poll, and you put it out to Twitter and you get a selection bias of all the people, either your followers or people just hanging around Twitter who might be like right-wing nut jobs. So you've got like the Daily Caller putting a Twitter poll out there, and then all the followers of Daily Caller who are super right-wing going, yeah, Trump won, Trump won, Trump won. And then he comes out with these poll numbers. Like, where you got those numbers from? Oh, you've got them from a Twitter poll of Daily Caller listeners. Subscribers or whatever. You're like, absolutely nuts. And part of me, there is this discussion I have, and I've heard other people on these shows have similar sorts of discussions. In fact, I should probably play you one from the newscast, the news agents, where they talk about, does he know this? Does he actually know the truth? Or does he believe what he's fed, or does he end up believing things because he's just ensconced in this whole information space? I have two children. One of my children he's on the spectrum, and he's got something called PDA, pathological demand avoidance. It's one of the most challenging. It's a really challenging condition, but it's quite similar to narcissistic personality disorder. And there are elements of one of my kids that I see in Trump loads. And one of the things that one of my boys does is he's unable to handle losing anything. So he can't lose, or he can't ever be in trouble. It can't ever be his fault for anything. It literally can't. Pathologically, there are like genetic, biological, and all sorts of influences on him internally, so that he cannot physically bring himself to accept responsibility for anything. And this is exactly what Trump does. And it's really fascinating, because what my boy does is invent narratives that will explain how something happened, but he believes those narratives. He literally will create a narrative that he would argue to the ends of the earth is the truth. So I'm often trying to work out, like, do you believe that? And he does believe that. And it's like, well, I was here with you and that's not what happened. But you're arguing that's what happened. And yet you will never, ever concede that that didn't happen, because you genuinely think you experienced that happening. But what your brain has done is invented this narrative so that you are not at fault, so that you have not lost. And that's part of his condition, right? This is why, we play a board game. If he doesn't win, that board's exploded and there's swearing and all sorts going on, because his brain just cannot. That's that, like, cognitive dissonance, like, I'm perfect, I can't do anything wrong, and I've just lost the game. So I see so much of his behaviors in, say, what Donald Trump does. And I'm wondering, does he believe this? I think he could easily create this narrative and be fed that narrative by all those people around him, and search that narrative using confirmation bias, such that he develops this reality that he genuinely believes. It's not that, like, I think he does really know that he lost the election. I think there's enough people that told him around him at the time. And I think that's one of those things. But then if you surround yourself with people that are reinforcing the lie that you are also spreading, then there is this idea that you can end up believing the stuff that you initially understood wasn't wholly true. Anyway, I thoroughly digress here. Go and check the newsagent's latest podcast on this. Was fascinating. Right. You even had people like Frank Luntz, who's a Republican pollster, saying it was a pretty bad performance.
Do you think Kamala won? And does that mean she may now win the election?
I think more accurately it's that Donald Trump lost. And this is not the worst debate performance I've seen in my career, but it's very close to it. The conversations about people eating dogs and cats, calling the leader of Hungary one of the greatest world leaders, repeatedly missing the opportunity to focus on inflation and affordability, and the complete inability to present his point of view without completely tearing into Joe Biden, into whomever was in his sights. It was a pretty negative performance, pretty pessimistic, cynical, contemptuous, and I think that this will cost him. Yes, I'm trying to decide if I want to go on record, and the answer is yes. I think that he loses because of this debate performance.
Wow.
Now, I disagree with him. I think people will forget this easily and they'll sink back to their normal kind of status quo. It will have some effect. It has had some effect in the polls, like a tiny bit. I think average debate bump is 1.1% in the polls, and I think Harris is probably seen similar to that. So yeah. Now, a couple of other things that happened in the debate that you could easily have missed. Here's one of them.
Mr. President, on January 6th, you told your supporters to march to the Capitol. You did send out tweets, but it was more than 2 hours before you sent out that video message telling your supporters to go home. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day?
You just said a thing that isn't covered. Peacefully and patriotically, I said during my speech, not later on. Peacefully and patriotically. And nobody on the other side was killed. Ashley Babbitt was shot by an out-of-control police officer.
The key that Tim Miller's going to talk about is nobody on the other side was killed. Nobody on the other side.
Should have never, ever shot her. It's a disgrace.
There are a couple key points there that I just want to really dig in on. The first one is he talks about how there are people that are on the other side that didn't get injured. On the other side, the people on the other side didn't get injured. And it's one of the things he's doing this just kind of rapid fire words out. He's talking, he's blabbing, it's nonsense, it's lies. It's like hard to keep track of everything that he's saying. He just talked about Ashley Babbitt, who had been killed, and that was kind of jarring. And then he's like, and then people on the other side weren't injured. And in real time, I didn't even catch this. I have to admit. I caught it upon rewatching because of the other horrible thing that he says a sentence later. And then on rewatch, I was like, wait, who is the other side? Who's the other side? Who's he talking about? And it's obvious, I assume you figured it out by now, he's talking about the Capitol Police. That in Donald Trump's warped mind, that January 6th was some kind of battle between two teams. The MAGA team that wanted to overturn the election, the insurrectionists, the people that stormed the Capitol, the people that shit on the Capitol, the people that waved their racist flags and waved their Trump flags right next to them.
That's literally true. There was feces smeared on the walls of the Capitol.
And it was them, the MAGA team, his team, against the other team, which was the Capitol Police, the people who wanted to defend and uphold the Constitution. I guess Mike Pence is on the other team. Others, Nancy Pelosi, of course, would be on the other side. And I just think about how warped that is and how demented that is.
Okay, so that's one point. And I advise anyone to go back and look at the actual footage of January the 6th and wonder if it was really people, tourists having a nice day out, as some have intimated. There's some horrific footage from January the 6th, and we forget how horrific it really was. Here's another very important thing that could have been missed from the debate.
That he goes on, and let's just play that clip one more time.
But we didn't do this group of people that have been treated so badly. I ask, what about all the people that are pouring into our country and killing people that she allowed to pour in? What about those people? What are they going to be prosecuted?
Okay, yeah, catch that again, because he catches himself. He says, we. It's like, who's we? And then he kind of pauses, and he's like, that group of people was being treated very badly. Who's the group of people that's being treated very badly? The so-called hostages, the violent criminals that have been jailed for their actions that day. Donald Trump, again, saw them as we, like he's with them. Like that was my posse, the people that are being treated very badly in his mind, the people that have been jailed for their violent assault on individual Americans as well as the Constitution. It was
really interesting. That's well worth pointing out, because I think there's possibly not enough criticism given of Trump and his support of those people, and the idea that storming the Capitol is to get the election overturned is somehow acceptable. Now, I'm probably only going to do, I'm going to cut this video short and only going to do this as another post-debate analysis and leave all my other stuff for later. But let's just have a look at how three people reacted differently to the debate. So we got former Trump strategist here, and we've got a couple of others.
Let's kick it off with you with this news from Trump that he won't debate Harris again. Is this a mistake?
No, I don't think so, because I think regardless of what the polls and the overall numbers say about who won, who lost, when you look at the Reuters panel, when you look at the quotes from the New York Times, it shows that the undecided voters, which is really the only voters that count right now, they didn't leave that debate thinking Kamala won or she didn't seal the deal. They still like the Trump policies. They want the lower costs. They want the secure border. She hasn't sold them yet. That's on her. I don't think another debate is in his interest.
I will note, though, in our CNN poll conducted after the debate, 69% of independents polled did think that Harris won the debate. And so you have to ask the question, would another debate?
In other words, yeah, independents weren't swung by that. So what's the point of having another debate? We've done a poll and they were. But, so, okay, you're empirically wrong, at least by our data. And then she goes on to talk to someone else.
Potentially be an opportunity for Trump to try to sway some of those independents he needs.
Donald Trump has debated more in presidential general elections than anyone in American history. And he won the debate against Joe Biden in our poll by 35 points. But the other 6 debates against Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, now Kamala Harris, he lost by an average of 25 points. Okay, he's a terrible...
This is worth remembering, and he's actually talking statistically lost, as in from the debates, from the post-election debates we did. And famously, Hillary Clinton did win the debate, and this is the idea, as Mitt Romney won the debate against the first debate against Obama, and you had Hillary Clinton winning a debate against Trump. In both cases, the person who lost that debate was elected, and you could have this situation where Kamala Harris won this first debate, but Trump ends up getting elected. But statistically speaking, actually, Trump is not a good debater. People think, oh yeah, he's really good in debate and it's X, Y, and Z. But actually, if you look at the data, he's not great. He appeals maybe to the base instincts of some people who are listening. But when you look at rhetorically what's going on and look at actual validity of arguments and how whether they landed, so on and so forth, he hasn't been particularly good.
Against Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, now Kamala Harris, he lost by an average of 25 points. Okay, he's a terrible debater. The Titanic didn't sail across the Atlantic a second time. Okay, he should mute his microphone when he's speaking, not just when Kamala is speaking. I mean, he's awful at this. He's the most experienced, and he gets worse with everyone, with the great exception of when President Biden just lost the debate. He just collapsed. And Trump won that, and that's to his credit. I didn't think he performed all that well, but it didn't matter. Yeah.
It's a really good point about that, is that actually Biden did lose that. So people are saying that Trump's performance in that debate was terrible. He was saying absolutely bonkers things. Biden should have eviscerated him in the debate, but Biden was cognitively unable to do so, and that's why all the alarm bells went, because actually Trump was there for the taking. So Trump didn't win that debate, Biden lost it.
Because Biden collapsed. But except for that one, he's been terrible. Of course he's not going to debate again. He's awful at it.
Kamala Harris is saying there should be another.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, she humiliated him. Yeah. She emasculated him. She spanked his fanny for 90 minutes in front of millions of voters. Why would he want to do that again? And of course, she wants to do it again because she scored an A+. She was stellar. She had high expectations going in. She surpassed those expectations and dismantled him. And so, of course, he's coming out.
Some are arguing that actually, with such high expectations for a second debate, she could just be setting herself up for a fall. But nonetheless, those arguments will possibly not matter at all, because it looks like he's not agreeing to do another debate. Now, we're going to go to Sarah Longwell, who deals with focus groups, and she's been doing this for many years, and she's actually been doing it since turning away from Trump's GOP. So she's a former Republican who is now tasking herself with the job of finding out what these key voters think, and then seeing what changes their mind and seeing how their minds change or don't, and feeding that back into strategies and whatnot. Although her sample size is obviously going to be small, because these are focus groups where you're talking in depth to people. You can't do that with like 1,000 people. This is like 3 people, 5 people. We've got 3 people here, the RFK voters who are disaffected, Biden or Harris voters gone to RFK. Can you get them back? We're looking at these people, but these are representatives. So we've curated a bunch of people for our focus groups, and we know that these people are exactly like this, which is exactly the sort of people that this represents, this whole demographic. And so you then get them to see the debate, and you say, right, let's look at these 3 people or 5 people and see how they feel about the debate. And although you can easily skew your data because you only have such a small sample size, these are carefully curated samples, and they do give you quite a lot of information. It's all about speaking to these people at depth to get a sense of how they feel.
Okay, so Tim's got great spin room content, but I've got fresh, hot focus group content. So we just did a group of swing voters from swing states. These are people who voted for Trump, voted for Biden in 2020, but we had 3 of them who we have talked to previously. They've been leaning.
So of those swing state voters and of those people who have voted for both, so both Biden and Trump previously, so 2016 Trump, 2020 Biden, now looking like moving back to Trump. And she said, of these types of people, we've got 3 of them who
RFK over Harris, and it was a clean sweep for Harris, both in head-to-head vote choice. So she had won those RFK leaners over with this debate performance. It was a clean sweep for Harris in terms of them believing that she had absolutely won the debate. The word that they used, and this is a thing that I think is really important and is something that she accomplished last night. One of the top words that people used organically without us bringing it up was presidential. She looked presidential.
That's good.
And there was a big Harris skeptic
in the group, like a guy who does not like her record as DA, knows a lot about it. Even
remember that guy.
Yeah, even we had him back in June, and so he was an RFK leaner. Even he got there on her, and despite still raising his objections about her time as the DA, but he was saying, he was like, Trump started talking about eating pets, and I just did a spit take. Like this. I mean, the number of people who are just like, what was he talking about? He looks crazy. And here's the thing, much like the Biden debate, because I tweeted this morning, but I think it's important in terms of the reaction that we're seeing from Republicans, which is they're saying the thing that people said to me, the sort of Dem pollster and the Dem activist who was on stage with me that night, and who was very angry with me after the Biden debate, because I was saying that is like a disaster for him. Like, I was being very honest with the audience. And I was like, guys, I'm going to level with you. As my job to do clear-eyed analysis. And I'm going to tell you that might be campaign ending. And these guys were so mad at me. And what they said on the stage that night was, debates don't matter. And if you look at Ben Shapiro and a bunch of the Republicans today, they are trying to argue that debates don't matter, which I got to say, 6 weeks following a debate that caused one of the two major candidates to drop out, saying that debates don't matter is like a nuclear level hot take.
I think they're calling that cope.
Yeah, that's like high level copium here, especially. Oh, this was the other thing in the focus group. They were like, no, the moderators were good. Like, there was not this sense that, and these groups, these flipper groups, some people might be like, okay, these are people who voted for Biden before. And it's true that they are, but they are also temperamentally conservatives. Like, they are center-right voters who just hate Donald Trump because he's like uniquely terrible, but like would love to vote for a Republican, is typically this kind of group. And so this is a group where after the last 3.5 years of Biden, we saw real backsliding. I talk about the backsliding a lot. And so for her to I think she did the thing that we desperately needed her to do, which was to make the case, not just that Trump is terrible, because these guys already kind of know that, but to make an affirmative case for her. And I think she did that.
So what's interesting about the debate as well is that she was really gunning for, quite literally gunning, because she talked about her owning a gun, Tim Walz owning a gun, gunning for the center-right voters and Republicans to steal them over to the Democrat and give them the Democrat ticket and give them a permission structure to come over. And this is what these focus groups, Sarah Longwell's focus groups, are. They literally are these types of voters. I'm going to go to a video that I was going to show later, and now I'm going to put it in the second part to this video. But I'm going to show you this because this is a new Wisconsin. So this is one of the kind of battleground sort of states up in, you got Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania up in the Great Lakes area. And there's a +5 Harris, very accurate as well. I think this is a very well-respected pollster that has come out with a +5 outside the margin of error poll in support of Harris. This is really big news, but it's the crosstabs that are important. So crosstabs are where you look at the different subcategories and see how they go and what do they tell you. He's just talked, this is a guy called Voting Trend, he's just talked about the different age sections, and that was interesting. But we're going to go here into Republicans, Independents, Democrats, and how they are looking at voting in Wisconsin, as according to this poll.
All right, so if we go ahead and look at party identification, we can see that with the Democrats, those who identify as Democrats are almost solidly behind Kamala Harris. Now, this is one thing that that is a big change from what we saw with Biden. We saw a lot of people with Biden just like, I don't know if I'm going to vote, right? Now we're seeing Kamala Harris really, really solidify the Democratic votes. I mean, the Republican vote is still pretty high, but a lot more are looking like they could stay home in Wisconsin. And of independent voters, we see a pretty big shift when it comes to Kamala Harris. However,
okay, this is huge. Okay, so the top one is party ID, leaners as independents. The second one is party ID, leaners as partisans. So it's two slightly different groups here. Now, what you have, so you've got two jobs. You want to solidify your own vote. And we're also talking about post-debate here. So the debate was aiming to do this. The intention of the debate was to solidify her own vote. So Democrats, come out and vote bloody Democrat. Don't go switch over to the other side. We want you to be part of our team again. All of you need to vote with your home team type thing. Okay. Then we want to look at independents in the middle and say, you guys come to us. Don't go to Trump. Come to us. And Trump likewise needs to be doing this. The question is, in the debate and in the campaign, is Trump doing that? Is Harris doing that better than Trump? So is she solidifying her own base, getting the independents over to her, and stealing some of the Trump voters or the GOP voters, or maybe the Reagan Republicans? And with Trump, is he solidifying his vote? Is he actually is he pushing some of those independent voters away? Is he pushing his own Reagan Republican voters away? And this Wisconsin poll is fascinating because Republican leaners as independents, right? Democrats get 99. Those ID'd as Democrats in this category, 99% of them are voting for Harris, and only 1%, you're only losing 1%. In the leaners as partisans, 98% are staying with Harris, 2% are going. So leaking 2%. With Republicans, 92%, not 99% in that top group, 92% are voting Trump, but leaking 3% to Harris and 5% to, I think, either you've got RFK still on the ticket here or maybe not voting, whatever, 5%. So that's losing 8%, whereas Democrats only lose 1%. So in that category, that's a -7 for the Republicans. In the leaners as partisans, you've got, okay, -2 for the Democrats here, but then you've got 6 and 3, which is 9, which is, again, -7 for the Republicans. That is bad news in a state where the margins are super important. Now, it gets worse because the independents as a leaning independent and independents as partisan, you've got 50% going Harris or 53% going Harris, 38% in the top group going Trump, and 12% going neither of the two, 25% in this second group of the independents going to Trump, and 21% going elsewhere, 53% going to Harris. So when we're talking about the three things, get your own voters, get the independent voters and the swing voters, or independent voters, and then get some of those swingy voters from the Republicans, or even like Reagan Republicans or whatever. Those are the three things she has to do from that debate and from her campaign. And looking at the Wisconsin crosstabs, she has done that. That is super, super important. You've got evidence there that there is a success. You've got an empirical justification for this, for the strategy that she is going for. And you've got empirical evidence that Trump's strategy isn't working. Not only that, you've also got a reflection in the amount of money being raised. So $47 million came out of the debate 24 hours after the debate, according to New York Times. So is that the same for the Republicans? Why is that? That has to reflect something. That has to reflect some kind of enthusiasm and some kind of impact that that debate had for Harris that it didn't have for Trump. Okay, now we're going to move on to some fact checking from that debate. So Republicans against Trump here says, Trump, we will do deportation. So this is kind of newsy. Do I do that? No, let's go to actual. We'll do that in my next video. It is pertinent to debate because she mentioned it debate. He's doubling down, blah, blah, blah. We're just going to look very quickly at crime rates. So something he mentioned in the debate is that, you know, crime is rife. Immigrants, they come into our country, illegal immigrants are doing crime. Now, as Steve Ratner says, immigrants are less likely than US-born citizens to commit crimes, particularly undocumented ones. Trump's stories about migrant crime are clearly fiction. Or if they're not fiction individually, the plural of anecdote is not data, right? You can come up with as many scary anecdotes as you like, but it doesn't mean that that is actually a trend. What they try and do is scare you with anecdotes and stories and claim that that is a trend and say, therefore, we need to stop migration on account of the criminality that it correlates with or that it causes in communities. But the reality is very different. So the blue bar here is US-born citizens. The purple are legal immigrants, and the yellow is undocumented immigrants. And in each case, like legal and undocumented immigrants do fewer crimes per thousand. So this is a percentage, a proportion. This isn't like real numbers, so it's not skewed by the amount of people you have. Proportionally, those categories do fewer crimes than US-born citizens in both violent crimes, property crimes, and drug violations. It's just not true what Donald Trump says. Violent crime has declined by 26% since Trump's last year in office, quite the opposite of going through the roof. So talking about crime going through the roof, it is actually falling significantly. And that's according to CIA data. Yeah, it's just, you can go and look at fact check. Is illegal immigration linked to more or less crime? It's just interesting to note that in a recent post, Trump noted that in 2015, Alex Nowresh from the Libertarian Cato Institute noted that in 2015, Texas police made 815,689 arrests of native-born Americans, 37,776 arrests of immigrants in the country illegally, and 20,323 arrests of legal immigrants. Given the relative populations of each group, so this is Texas, remember, right on the border, he wrote, quote, the arrest rate for illegal immigrants was 40% below the native-born Americans. In addition, he wrote the homicide arrest rate for native-born Americans was about 46% higher than the illegal immigrant homicide arrest rate. Other research from the Cato Institute attempted to provide national estimates. The research concluded, quote, illegal immigrants are 47% less likely to be incarcerated than natives, and legal immigrants are even less likely to be in jail or prison. Another study, does undocumented immigration increase violent crime, which was published in the journal Criminology in March, so this is relatively recently, looked at the influx of undocumented immigrants into communities in recent decades and concluded, quote, increased concentrations of undocumented immigrants are associated with statistically significant decreases in violent crime. In other words, the more undocumented immigrants you get into your community, the less crime there is. Crime goes down. This is literally the opposite to what Donald Trump says. Now, I'm not saying there aren't social cohesion issues. I'm not arguing for immigration. Forget the argument about immigration, whether it's good or bad. All we're doing here is fact-checking the fairly egregious claims from Donald Trump that crime is going through the roof and it's linked to illegal immigration, because that is statistically unsound. One of the study's author, Michael Light, a professor of sociology at Chicano Latino Studies at the University of Wisconsin, told us via email that the president is conflating two different issues and misusing statistics, so on and so forth. We have debunking the myth of the migrant crime wave from the Brennan Center for Justice. Data does not support claims that the United States is experiencing a surge in crime caused by immigrants. That's from May this year. The research does not support the view that immigrants commit crime or are incarcerated at higher rates than native-born Americans. In fact, immigrants might have less law enforcement contact compared to non-immigrants, focusing on the fact that is imperative, especially given the immigration has become a top issue for voters ahead of the election. Substantial research has assessed the relationship between immigration and crime. Numerous studies show that that immigration is not linked to higher levels of crime, but rather the opposite. Studies have also examined the impact of the concentration of immigrants in a community of crime patterns, finding that immigration is associated with lower crime rates and an increase in structural factors such as social connection and economic opportunity that are linked to neighborhood safety. When looking specifically at the relationship between undocumented immigrants and crime, researchers come to similar conclusions. Numerous studies show that undocumented immigration does not increase violent crime. Research examining crime rates in so-called sanctuary cities also found no discernible difference when compared to similarly saturated cities without sanctuary policies. One study that focused on drug crimes and driving under the influence found that all unauthorized immigration status was associated with reductions in arrests for those offences, so on and so forth, and it goes on and on and on. It is egregious when, as a political candidate, you can stand up and effectively lie through your teeth to the audience. I mean, if you're talking about illegal immigrants when actually they're legal, because we're talking about the Haitian. So remember, this was all about Haitian immigrants in a community in Springfield eating pets. You are playing with fire again here, because these people can vote because these are legal migrants.
Very disturbed by these comments, because J.D. Vance, instead of retracting and apologizing, he's doubling down and changing his story and saying, oh, constituents are calling my office saying that they saw someone eat a dog or cat or ate Garfield. I don't think so. He's lying. I asked the media to reach out to Senator Vance and ask him for the records of his legislative office. We want to see what constituents are actually saying these lies. Reba, who works in my office, we record the phone number and name of every person that calls our office. That's what a legislative office is supposed to do. And so we're going to ask J.D. Vance, show us the proof. Because there is no proof. You're a liar. You're lying about such good people. That's un-Christian. How dare you? How dare you go to church? You don't deserve to be a senator.
That's right.
And I'm asking Elon Musk. I know you were in space today, but honestly, you act like a space cadet. How dare you double down on these lies and spread these fallacies and spread these lies through Twitter or X or whatever you call it? You're not even American. You're South African, and the allegations are that it was a South African who was taking the goose and the geese, whatever, the duck. So these statements are completely false, and there's no way they could justify it or verify it. Thank you.
So you have 300,000 Haitians who can vote in Florida. That is potentially a bit of an own goal. Now, if you're talking about going to another country to eat cats, it might be worth looking at this. Foreigners come to our country and kill our animals. I wonder who that is. Do we have a Trump in the picture there? And a dead cat? Could have. Other claims from the debate were tariffs. Trump's proposed tariffs will hit low earners the hardest, reducing after-tax incomes by 6.3% in the bottom quintile. So Steve Ratner fact-checking some other of the claims. Senator J.D. Vance has come out and said that economists disagree about whether tariffs lead to higher prices. So this week, the University of Chicago surveyed economists and asked them exactly this question. 43% strongly agreed, 52% agreed, 2% were uncertain, and 2%, which is one person, disagreed. So when he said they disagree, the economists disagree, actually they don't. Only one economist disagreed, but he misunderstood the question. This one economist who disagreed appeared to understand the question as asking about a tariff on one country rather than all countries, as Trump is proposing. In other words, someone has gone and fact-checked the claim that economists disagree on whether tariffs lead to higher prices. They all agree. And even if one person didn't, that's statistically insignificant, I would argue. They all agree that tariffs will lead to higher prices. Trump was not a net oil importer, but the US became a net oil exporter under Biden for the first time in over 70 years. Now, of course, this might have connections to the global price of oil as well, but the US is pumping more oil at the moment than any other country in the history of the world. So, when you stand up and say drill, baby, drill, so on and so forth, it becomes a little bit difficult. Anyway, that's enough for this video, doing a bit of fact checking of the debate, seeing some fallout of the debate. It looks like there's a little bit of a bump for Harris in the polls. Some polls it's going to be fascinating to see what the polls do going forward. Where it gets quite interesting is registrations. Now, we've seen that Taylor Swift has come out and endorsed Harris, and that's led to a whole bunch of interest in registration. We're going to see if there is genuinely a Swift effect on actual registrations, not just logging on and looking at the site, as we know that there was 407,000 people did after she announced the endorsement, and then further made a comment in the VMA, the MTV Awards. So there could be an effect on registration, but I have been looking, and actually prior to that, we have seen Republicans ahead in registration, which is quite surprising. but there are some claims as to the quality of that data, because I think that data doesn't include a whole bunch of different states where there is really high registration for the Democrats. So there are loads of questions concerning registration that I would like answered. And it's quite often when you look at these headline stats, there's a lot more to be said beneath them, like you could argue with these oil export stats as well. Anyway, that's enough for me from this one. That's just dealing with the debate, and I probably won't have to bring up the debate again, but I just thought this would be important to understand, to get a handle on some of these ideas. Let me know what you think. Am I wrong anywhere? And I will do another one later that's looking at different areas of the campaign. Thank you so much for indulging me. Take care. Toodle pips.